For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to Less Talk, More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice of building decarbonization. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett, the self-proclaimed Adam Newman, Green Building. Today's guest, Alex Kruzel, is an author, entrepreneur, business advisor, and leader of Telesto Strategy, a management consulting firm based in Chicago, focused on integrating environmental security and sustainability into corporate strategy. She's also got a book out called The Courage to Continue, with a fresh perspective and advice on the ever-evolving world of corporate sustainability. I saw her speak in Chicago and was enamored with this idea because, as we talk about in the podcast, I asked a question when she spoke, like, has the corporate sustainability movement failed? So I think we enjoyed dancing around that topic. What'd you think of her in general?
Yeah, I thought she was a great guest. Different perspective than a lot of our recent guests. So I think it was a good one. Went by quick, and I think there's a lot of good content in there.
Yeah, and she's, got these kind of big ideas, and the kind of people she's advising Fortune 500 boards and thinking about, changing the narrative to national security. It's like, again, fresh perspective. It's cool to hear.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into all that with Alex, we're going to dive into a segment we're calling What's in the News? And for us, the news is about sustainability, decarb, climate, all the things we like to bat around here. But today we're going to talk about an article, a podcast by Ezra Klein, who's a very influential thought leader, author, podcaster. And he wrote an article, an opinion, and he also did it on his podcast, same title, Is Decarbonization Dead? So it's getting a lot of attention. Tom Steyer had a big rebuttal in a LinkedIn post just to the title. Of course, the nuance in the podcast and article are to be understood, but let's just start with my perspective, which is that's a big question, and the podcast gets into a lot of different fronts. But I loved something Tom Steyer said in response to what which he said, "When you make it easy to build, clean energy gets built." And it's like this constant theme I keep coming back to when everyone's just thinking the world's going to end because of the big, beautiful bill or the rollback of corporate sustainability and climate commitments. And it's like, well, maybe we all just have to be better at building shit in this country because clean energy now is just the winning economic solution. So we need to kind of swing back to less government in a weird way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a couple of things. I think permitting is a big issue for clean technology, but for other big problems that we have, like affordable housing, it's the cities that are holding up so much progress in this country. We could do a whole podcast on just that. Whether you're permitting a solar project or you're permitting an affordable housing project, it's often the permitting and the regulation that gets in the way. So I agree with you and Tom 100% there. I think the other big thing, and we touched on this in the pod, is we, the sustainability movement and Democrats, need to take some lessons in marketing. We suck at marketing and messaging. It's so bad, and it takes us too long to realize that it's not resonating. I think, if you reframe it as national security, if you reframe it as saving money, and if we get away about whining about wildlife and animals and probably speak to topics that resonate with more of Americans, I think we'll have a better job at continuing decarbonization. But man, I was just thinking with the Coldplay scandal, Coldplay Gate, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
You see how the Ryan Reynolds marketing team hired Gwyneth Paltrow to be the spokesperson. Let's hire Ryan Reynolds for climate change. That guy would crush it. He would help us with messaging, which would help so much of this problem. But we as an industry just can't get it together. We just keep saying the same thing.
Well, and I actually might push back on you a little bit there. I actually think like we should be more about animals and nature and biodiversity and ecosystems, the things that bind all human beings around the environment, and less about climate change and counting carbon emissions. And they talked about it in the podcast, like carbon taxes and carbon pricing. Like, give me a break. What world are we going to see carbon pricing ever matter in this country? I can't foresee it in my lifetime.
No, I'm with you there. I don't think we talk about that stuff, but I think we got to do a better job talking about money. I mean, just
money and nature. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, you and I have both been, this is an industry full of overeducated people who, haven't been entrepreneurs and run businesses and failed, and seen how, you got to make quick decisions and you got to think big, and your messaging has to be succinct, and you don't have time to be hiring think tanks to come up with marketing strategies that ultimately are overthought and overworded and never going to resonate.
So I know we're going long on this bit, but I have a thought in line with that. I've been going on a lot of podcasts. I'm just doing this podcast tour, and I get asked questions about the sustainability industry a lot. I think we would do our industry great justice if we required kids to work for 2 to 3 years in the industry that they're going to go to grad school for. Because so many people, and I don't think this is isolated to sustainability, so many kids go right from high school into college, into grad school for sustainability. They have no concept of how the real world works. So they come out, like we saw it at Bren, too idealistic, just not grounded in reality. And then it's hard for them to make any impact because they don't really know how things happen.
Well, in theme with the show, line with the show's theme, we can sit here and complain about it, or we can start the Let's Talk More Action Academy for young professionals entering the workspace. we can monetize it.
Professor Caesar.
Yes, it's always been a dream of mine. Well, it's a good point, and I think Ezra Klein got what he wanted, which was a lot of clicks and attention with a very provocative title. Is decarbonization dead?
It's a good
title. I think the answer is no, it's not dead. I think it's going to come back stronger than ever, but it's going to be based on dollars and cents and economic activity. And I don't think we're going to need the government as much as they talk about in the podcast. They think we do.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, that was fun. But before we dive into all that, let's jump into a conversation with Alex Kruzel. Alex Kruzel is an author, entrepreneur, business advisor, and leader of Telesto Strategy, a management consulting firm based in Chicago focused on integrating environmental security and sustainability into corporate strategy. Prior to founding Telesto, Alex has spent the past 2 decades advising the Fortune 500 and public sector clients globally. As a reflection of her commitment to service and her country, Alex served in the Peace Corps as an education volunteer in Southern Africa. Alex contributes to Chicago's strong civic community through her efforts at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs as a member of its board of directors. As a mother, Alex is inspired by the inherent curiosity of children and is reminded of the need for generational thinking. So, Alex, welcome to Let's Talk More Action.
Thanks. I appreciate being here.
So, we get right to work. We ask our guests the same question to start the show. Alex, how are you taking action to make the world a better place?
Yeah, love the show, love the question. For me, it's, I could answer a number of ways, but the one that comes to mind is reminding Americans here in this country that we actually have a lot in common. A lot in common, and we don't need to be as polarized and political as we might like to.
I think we should just end the podcast. That's such a simple thing to say, but it's so important. There's so many things that get politicized that just shouldn't be, because everybody is on the same page. But unfortunately, it's been politicized and causes divide.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, Joel, that's sort of where we connected under the auspices of how do we have more room for nonpartisan discussion on kitchen table issues, and climate sustainability should be one of those, and it should be pretty straightforward. I recently came forward with this book and doing the research about American sentiment, is overwhelming. It's like, yeah, 80% of Americans think corporates should be doing something on it. 92% of Americans, they don't care what caused climate change, but they think we can fix it. And I mean, a lot of people just, it's 90-something% want renewable technology. It's like, why is this so hard then?
Yeah, these are great questions. Alex, let me tee this up for Owen. You and I met when you spoke at a Chicago Council on Global Affairs event about your soon-to-be released book. So that would have been back in March-ish, I think. Mm-hmm. Our mutual friend Kyle Hendricks brought me to the event. He's a friend of the show, so I'm sure he'll be listening when this goes live. But there's lots for us to discuss because I know you're very multidimensional and work on a lot of fronts, as your intro very eloquently alluded to. But let's dive into the book because that really caught my attention. I've joked about this with Owen on the show before. Like, I want to write a book kind of about how I think the corporate sustainability movement has failed, and maybe we just need to blow it all up and rethink it. And that's probably not the right way to, be solution oriented. I'm sure your book is better at positioning new ideas, but I think I even asked it in your speaking engagement. That was like my question. I was like, hey, Alex, do you think we failed? So all that to be said, tell us about the book, maybe your primary thesis, and respond to, have we failed?
Yeah, Joel, well, I give you a lot of cred whenever I talk, and I've been doing sort of a roadshow with the book, because it's one of the top questions I bring back. Someone asked me, hey, has corporate sustainability failed? And that has stayed with me, and it's a really good prompt for many of us to think through. And what really led me to actually this book, one of my great friends is based out of London. She's a CMO of a global company. She came to stay with me, and she said, Alex, it was the weekend right before Inauguration Day. She said, Alex, I knew that President Trump would be reelected. To me, that was a given. And his messaging, make America great again, was just so on point. There was something in there for everyone. And that kind of stayed with me. And then there was just this moment, an inexplicable moment. It came to me, I said, oh, what if we made the environment great again? And this is before Maha came out and all those things. Like, what if we made the environment great again? Well, how can we link up these, again, kitchen table issues to the current whole of government national security agenda? There's got to be a way. And so as I thought through it, did due diligence, I got to talk to people in the current administration, those that were setting up sort of new councils or forum or committees around sustainability, around climate tech, around energy policy. I really tried to get a better handle on it. I mean, first on American history, it really goes to the Republicans that have really led the way in environmental conservation. Nixon signed in the EPA by executive order, which a lot of us forget about. It was George Bush Sr. who said, look, we need to have the broader expansion of environmental protection. Herbert Hoover said we need to not only commercialize waterways, we need to protect them so we can commercialize them indefinitely.
Teddy Roosevelt, Republican too?
Yeah, of course.
But can I jump in for a sec? Because I like where this is going, but I think the piece of the story that's maybe missing is eventually protect our environment went to decrease carbon emissions. And that's when everything changed, because then it wasn't just we want clean air, we want clean water. It's we don't want coal, we don't want oil, we want that money out of lobbying, etc. How do you overcome that?
And we want to spend all our time and resources counting this invisible gas in the atmosphere.
Or maybe how do we go back to the messaging that worked? You can answer either question.
Let's let Alex.
I mean, how do you get to the right messaging? And I do think that's where there has been some failure in the corporate sustainability movement. Thinking back and doing some searching on language from 5 years ago, it's the right thing. And so there's this moral argument to it, which I know many of us in the field, like any field that someone chooses to be in, feels like a moral justification for what they're doing. You name the area, whether you're a firefighter, a teacher, someone who is actually working on energy access in coal propagation, right? So I think that's overcoming the anti versus con, or the for versus against. That sort of dualism is really easy to get into, and I think that's what we got into, quite frankly. And too much of a moral existential dilemma, as opposed to something that would convince almost anyone in a corporate board or an executive setting.
Yeah.
So that's where I think we have some opportunity. And then, not to mention, there's a financial element and national security, defense,
Yeah.
and competition with China.
Yeah.
Can we anchor those things more comprehensively?
That's what I was just going to bring up. I feel like we are at this inflection point right now where if we got our shit together, we could use AI and the war against China to reposition renewables.
Yeah, and also I'd throw quantum into the mix. I'm sort of, Joel, I don't know if you were able to go. Last week, Chicago Council was having a global quantum forum. So 20-something countries came to Chicago, and we're doing quite a bit in sort of the quantum park on Chicago's south side where the old U.S. steel mill was. And I think you're right. It's sort of next-gen space race. And so how do you get quantum for energy management? Where you had the CEO of Exelon, the CEO of Southern Energy Company, where you had Constellation Energy there, all in agreement saying, look, if we don't fix energy prices and a la our renewable portfolio, there will be a revolution in this country.
Yeah.
That sounds dark and over the top. I have not heard something like that recently at that type of event, but that's what they all agreed upon.
We need people saying these dramatic shots in the arm to everyone to say this is not playing around time anymore. Our grid, our electricity future, our energy future is very it's a challenging time. So I think we'll just summarize it there.
But the quantum potential, so AI, the data centers, CPUs, GPUs, and now QPUs with quantum, the quantum side can make it more efficient. And that's why you had energy companies at the table at this discussion, because one, to recruit all the quantum activity in Chicago, the CEO of Exxon went to Australia with the governor to say, we will have you covered. If you come here, you will get the energy and electricity that you need. But not only that, how does it play the other way? How do we use quantum technology to take, again, all the lack of efficiency, all the waste out of energy production and do it in a green way in accordance with Illinois' net zero policy?
Joel, to your earlier question or statement, question, has corporate sustainability failed?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, have we just failed at the marketing? Is it that simple of a fix? I mean, hearing you talk, hearing Joel, you ask that question, I agree, most Americans are aligned on this issue. But it's how we've messaged it that turns most people off. Sometimes it even turns me off. And I'm like a hardcore environmentalist. But when I hear all these nerds talking about invisible gas and we can't do this and we can't do that because it's going to hurt the animals, that turns a big part of the people, a big percentage of the planet off of renewables and off of sustainability. Maybe it's just a marketing fix. And I know that's not easy in of itself, but maybe that's where the industry needs to kind of focus.
Well,
Joel, what do you think?
Well, we did this. We did a bit a couple episodes ago where I don't even remember what was the prompt, Owen, but I got into one of my rants on just climate maybe is the problem, carbon emissions, net zero, climate, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. That whole messaging, it's not working. It's too wonky. You're never going to inspire a movement. You're actually kind of probably losing people on the movement, as we're all alluding to right now. So, but is there the things that galvanize us? And we talked about maybe it's saving the oceans or it's protecting more wild places. And I was talking about, I think, now I'm remembering, I watched this documentary about the oceans that's new, David Attenborough, and there's footage of them scraping the bottom of the oceans. First time you're ever seeing this footage. And it's we wouldn't allow this in the rainforest, but we're allowing it in the ocean. So all that to be said, Alex, I know you're thinking about this. You're advising big companies, big decision makers. You wrote this book. Is any of this part of it? Are we too focused on climate being the negative part? I guess what's your thesis here?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I mean, one, I hear where you're both coming from, but right now the sustainability agenda is sidelined because of global supply chain and trade. So a lot of the companies that we advise, and you have to take it industry by industry, those that are hanging on by the margins, let's think about food, CPG, packaging companies that operate, with margins to the right of the decimal point, right? They're all in volume, and volumes are being threatened right now. They said, look, Alex, last year we hoped for some modest growth. This year we're trying to break even. So anything that's voluntary side, and I'm not seeing immediate financial return this year, I have to reconsider.
Interesting.
And then with corporate sustainability going the way of compliance right now, there's also a rationalization and reorging that's happening across large corporates. So they're getting driven to the GC, General Counsel. So a lot of heads of sustainability now report to the GC, pure play compliance, not really integrated with the enterprise, just, hey, what do I have to report on every year, especially for Europe or getting ready for California?
Yep.
And then because of that, some companies are just having a special GC for ESG or sustainability, and that's where it is. Where we're pushing right now is like, how do we break through some of that noise? One of the things we're pushing on, and curious for your reaction, is the monetization of sustainability. For corporate leaders, for boardrooms, how does it put money in your pocket now?
I think
it goes. So curious for your reaction, but there's activities underneath that, but that's the headline that we've been engaging boards with.
I mean, I feel like
that feels obvious right now.
Yeah, I agree.
And Alex, a few of our guests, there's definitely a theme to the guests and the experts in this field. Everyone's like, no, we've shifted to this where you're describing. It's got to make sense. It's got to be immediate, and it's risk aversion on the other side.
Yeah.
But were we misguided to ever think there was a world where that wouldn't be the case? Like this fantasy land of net zero commitments that were voluntary was ever going to become real? Was that like misguided?
No, I mean, I think it'll all come back. That's not gone. It's just sleeping. It's in hibernation.
I'm going to take the opposite side of that. I think that's gone forever, and it should be. I think if a project does not drive value, it's philanthropy, and that's not the business of corporate sustainability. So I think either we need to figure out how to explain the monetization of said project, or kick it to the philanthropy department.
Well, let me push back on that actually, and play a little bit between here. I think there is a place though for environmental philanthropy in corporate responsibility. I think this is like a very evolving conversation. Like, what have we just gone through in the sequence of this discussion? Like, it used to work. Republicans did it, and there was all this public support, as Alex given us these facts about the percentages of the population that support protecting nature, air, and water. And then we went into carbon emissions and climate, and maybe that was misguided or a marketing challenge. But I come back to, like, big companies want to do the right thing. They want their brand to be associated with doing things that the public likes. And there is some kind of voluntary thing to do. I just don't know if it's climate net zero commitments anymore.
Isn't that more marketing, though, than anything else? Like, Alex, to your point, I think we have to drive home the point of, like, these projects add value. And that's the corporate sustainability, or that's the ESG. Joel, to your point, I agree. Like, companies want to look good and they want to improve their image, but that shouldn't fall under the same department, I don't think, because that's where you start then getting questions from leadership about, is this ESG department worth it?
Well, we're getting really nuanced here. That's why it's great to have the expert to help clean up all these miscellaneous points we're throwing around.
Yeah, and that's where it does get tricky because it's persona based. So, Owen, you bring up a good point. Where you have the head of sustainability and ESG, right? What are the skills that they bring to the table? And so right now, that's actually a tricky conversation, right? Because a lot are looking to compliance. They're not looking to climate science or nature-based solutions. That's on pause, right? Some of that stuff. So then if you have carbon accounting, there's been great new ads technology-wise to make that a little bit easier, right?
Yep.
So do you actually just need a good manager to head this? And if so, is it really more of a center of excellence that needs to look through across your functions, or should it be a marketer? But again, we've moved beyond greenwashing.
Yeah.
So what are the right skills to bear right now? I think that's also part of the crisis in corporate sustainability.
Yeah, it's a great question. I tend to try to just like be a little provocative on LinkedIn just to, get clicks if I'm being honest here and there. But sometimes it's just my nature. I like to poke at people. I always have been. But someone posted recently about sustainability teams. There's a guy named Gus Bartholomew, Alex. I don't know if you see him on LinkedIn. He speaks around the same topics you do, just like broad conversation. He's British based, but like sustainability departments and the challenges and the evolution of these groups and the talent that we need and how those organizations are structured. But, he was talking about fractional CSOs, and I commented right away, like, I think the fractional CSO with a smart AI tool is coming to take out these overbloated sustainability teams. Yeah. And that post, that was a comment under someone's post. I got like 10,000 impressions on it. So like, it definitely like strikes a chord with people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'd love to hear your perspective on that movement.
The reorgs are happening. I hear about them. I see them. We're working through some of them behind the scenes, because you're right. I do think if it's non-voluntary, I want my audit committee on it. I want my general counsel on it. If it's voluntary, like, again, what are some of the strategic initiatives? Okay, are these going back to the days of CSR and things that make us feel good, or donations, or this or that? Okay, I might not need a huge team. When we think about, we offer digital twinning, AI for building decarb. And our prop is like, okay, you take away a lot of people hours, manual work in Excel by having a tool like this. Exactly what you just described. So I do think this is a moment for reinvention. And if we can align more to hardcore accounting and finance skills to demonstrate the value, I do think that could be a route for the future of sustainability. Or we have a choice here: go the way of environmental security, competition with China, reorientation of supply chains, and say, how do we do supply chain transparency, traceability, dual use, commercialization of technology? And think about, how are we in the business of national security, and how does environmental security ladder up?
How do you see that concept resonating with the people that you're talking about, like repositioning sustainability for national defense?
Yeah, I mean, people are interested. I usually get, tell me more.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. It's a novel idea.
Yeah.
Although I feel
Alex,
like that is what the industry attempted at the last seconds of the one big beautiful bill being passed. Like, if you take away all these renewables, you're going to put all the data centers at risk, which means we're going to lose the race for AI, which has so many downstream effects. And it seems like politicians were more interested in protecting the fossil fuel industry than really thinking about long-term vision, which, I'm not surprised by. But fixing that, I think, is a bigger challenge than probably repositioning sustainability. Like, how do we get the country to think long-term again?
Yeah, exactly. And like, you can think about EVs too. And to be additive to what you just said, Owen, I agree. Our ICE, ICE vehicles, are those the way that, is going to be the next wave of mobility for the future of the whole world? Probably not, right? So we're losing on different dimensions of competition with China, and being bearish on renewable tech, EV, all of that won't help us. I think there's a lot of evidence to that. And it's interesting because you're right. One of the unique places in Washington, D.C., where there is a lot of bipartisan cooperation, potentially even too much, is China containment. Yet that wasn't enough to get the job done for the big, beautiful bill.
Well, I don't want to continue down that rabbit hole. I'll just add, though, I think...
Thank you.
Well, I think this was like the fossil fuel industry's last stand. It's the fatalism of like these next 3-4 years, and the backtracking on some of our renewable energy targets or deployment is real. But in 2028, both political candidates, maybe there's a third party, they're going to run on everything we're discussing here. Like, we need a lot of energy. It's crazy to be pushing away at renewables when they can be deployed so quickly and they're dropping in cost. So I think like this was a blip, and I'm not as concerned about it as others. I think we're all saying similar things here. The economics and the realities of the power of the technology will rule the day. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, and even just building on that quickly, when you look at Lazard's analysis on the levelized cost of energy, that bears out. And that was pre-Big Beautiful Bill being signed, right? So there's a degree of policy sensitivity to the cost effectiveness of a number of renewable and clean technologies. Yeah, regardless, you strip away the policy, they're still very competitive.
Yep.
And still often the cheapest form of additionality. Not always, but still very, very competitive, and therefore will be in the equation.
And that those trends will continue into the coming future for sure. Well, Alex, we didn't even get a chance for you to talk about the book here. So the book is called The Courage to Continue. Again, I was able to attend an event where you dug deeply into some of your theses and why you wrote it, and I think you've alluded to some in this conversation. But let's take a step back. Here's the floor. We're at one of your events where you're doing a book reading. What's the book? Why is it important? Why is it important now? What are you trying to say?
Yeah, for sure. My book, Courage to Continue, came out, like you said, late March. And with I'm a consultant, and sometimes they're very annoying, and we think we have all the answers.
Sound like Joel.
Apologize for the love PowerPoint too. Sorry. I know AI is coming for us, so you guys are all in good shape. That being said, I want to come with questions, prompts, more so than answers, and say, look, if we take a hard and fast look at all these dimensions of what you could call environmental security, things like regulation, stranding of assets, insurance, critical minerals, supply chains, what are big businesses doing? What do Americans want? Like many dimensions, and it's choose your own adventure. How do the facts bear out? What is the case to continue or not with sustainable investments, sustainability and climate-related investments? And that's where, again, it's sort of depending on your area, your industry, vertical, if you're a policymaker, if you're an academic, if you're in business. I wanted to try to include something for everyone to say, look, before especially we knew what was going to happen with the IRA, let's take some time to evaluate and find more space in the middle. So that was the attempt with the book. It worked a little bit different world when I wrote it. Now we have a little bit more certainty in terms of the operating environment for the next several years. But that's okay. It's our job to innovate around them and keep pushing. So that's what I intended to do. I've been speaking at different places regarding this and engaging with these different audiences.
Is the book more like thought-provoking questions for different industries, or do you end up giving advice to those industries?
The former.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's more about the prompts and look at data. I about maybe 550 endnotes in there to make sure it's not the world according to Alex. I don't think anyone would want to read that. So,
plus she's a consultant though, and she can't be giving out all her ideas in a book.
But there's something there for everyone. And again, like who am I to say that of all the industries and all the geos, localized grids, cost of capital, different operating environments. The hard thing about our field, there's no one size fits all, and it's a better story per industry, per vertical. Yeah. So that's where I wanted to give space for that and actually have people challenge me. I love the debate, actually. So
that must be why your work is so interesting. Owen's deep in solar on multifamily, and there's lots of reasons as an entrepreneur you should really focus on a niche and know it well, as he does. And right now I'm very focused on commercial real estate with the software product that I work on, but like we're environmentalists. Owen and I met in grad school getting a master's in environmental science and management in Santa Barbara, and we think about lots of things that are related to this industry deeply. So I would imagine in your work, even thinking about the book, and as you just described, it's the challenge of this industry. It's so multidimensional and so different depending on industry and geography, but I'm sure that's what keeps it interesting, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And then when you look at like the companies who are really pushing things forward, there is a clear pattern though. It's the high-tech companies. And one of the hypotheses around that is they're not extractive, right? They don't pull things from the earth necessarily. They're not manufacturing. They don't necessarily have smokestacks associated with their operations. They don't have pipelines. They don't need ports, right? Things like that. But on the other side of that, that gives me a lot of hope. When you think about market cap for Apple, you compare that to GDP, that's the size of the UK. NVIDIA, in terms of they're pushing forward right now, they've gone out publicly and said, look, we're not stopping with these investments. If you liken their market cap to GDP, that's Brazil. That's Microsoft crazy. To France, right? So when you think about all that we have in this country that's pushing for an agenda, when your unit of measure sometimes is at the country level, not thinking about a company as a sort of strange bedfellow to that conversation, then I think you're missing some of the progress that's happening.
So there was a bit of a disagreement earlier between the two of you on my question of the future of net zero and climate. And Alex, it's interesting. You were like pretty confident in your response. Now that'll come back. It's just sleeping right now. And I don't know. Maybe I'm too caught up in the moment, and I witnessed at a big company like priorities change. But I would probably more align with Owen, thinking like, are we ever going to get back to, in America, big companies voluntarily committing to net zero commitments and being pretty detailed and transparent about how they approach those? I guess let's go back to you, Alex, and think like, in 5 years, how does that look? Is it like, has something shifted in the zeitgeist of America, or what's leading to that?
Twofold. First, the easy answer is regulation. They're going to have no choice. So it's really interesting in terms of the legal operating environment. What could make you compliant for EUDR and one of their 10 standards, demographics, right, can make you illegal or a target for investigation by DOJ here in the United States.
Wow.
Regardless of what Europe's doing, some people say, fine, Alex, I hear you, Europe, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I only operate in the United States. Okay, fine. California, the threshold for requirement for the California climate rule, not only California climate rule, which requires decarb in alignment with TCFD, we have Illinois, we have Pennsylvania, we have New York, we have Washington State. Other states are following, which require disclosure. Not only disclosure, but assurance, third-party assurance. People like the big audit firms of the world saying, yeah, these aren't lies. This data makes sense. On top of that, you do have the cultural zeitgeist. I will fight you guys on this one. Look back to Henry Ford and problems and all the things he did. I'm not endorsing him. He talked about these things. He said, I need to take care of my employees. I need to have pensions for my employees. I need to treat them well. Like CSR blossomed in the Great Depression. These things are cyclical.
So, I mean,
Let's hear the retort.
I don't think
it's good answer.
I don't think transparency. I mean, transparency is very different than net zero, right? Like reporting emissions, that's one thing. Getting to net zero, entirely different. So, I agree that regulations will drive compliance to report, but I still think companies are going to start pushing back on net zero because I think it's just a marketing stunt that really hasn't proved to be, like, it hasn't turned out to be what people thought it would be. Joel and I had this conversation last week. I take the stance that it's more important to reduce your direct emissions to the extent that you can, that makes sense within your business, than to go full-blown net zero and make up that delta with carbon offsets that nobody's verifying that are just fake. So it's like, let's push the industry to make real decreases in emissions. And then to the CSR piece, I agree with what you're saying about the Great Depression, but I think all of that can be it can be tracked and monetized. Like happier employees are generally more productive. So I think I agree with what you're saying, but I still think the core of this industry needs to do a better job explaining why we're doing certain things. Like, what is the business value of doing these things? It doesn't mean we stop doing them. It just means we position them differently.
Yeah, and I think there has to be appetite at the board level. I feel like there's a barrier there.
Well, if you make the company more money and you show them how you're making more money, like this, this is how I cut my teeth in corporate sustainability and in energy management, was never talking about the environment, never talking about kilowatt hours, never talking about polar bears or carbon emissions. It was always dollars. And those projects always move forward because that's what the board gets. And I feel like that's what our industry lacks sometimes. We're too compassionate. We're too interested in these environmental impacts, which are super important. That's not really how decisions get made.
Yeah, I agree. Because you have to break through that noise. Think about it. One of the largest automotive companies in the world, talking to one of their board members recently, their audit committee, which again, for right or for wrong, they hear a lot about sustainability initiatives because of disclosures, and then they want to hear what else, like, well, what's their strategy around it? And then you get the CISO who then talks about voluntary, all these other pieces. They met, on average, this one company, one of the biggest in the world, 17 times last year. On average, a corporate director is spending 240 hours if they're in the audit committee. Man. And then they're spread so thin, and then cyber, where sort of the average incident costs an enterprise now over $6 million per incident. Like and then supply chain and tariff impairment exposure. There's so many things at the highest level, and you don't have the fluency or literacy. If you look at the PwC report, people like to sort of really boost their own rating and evaluation of how good they are at something. When you think of corporate directors, only 23% of them think they know enough to make good decisions on this topic.
Wow. Well, it's because what started as CSR or ESG or net zero is, I mean, to your point, it's now compliance based across so many different factors that it's just impossible to be an expert in all of that. Yeah.
So then what I do here, though, working with boards, is, well, let's just be a good business. Let's do the right thing, right? Because it's so complicated, and they're looking for an easier way to message it. So that's where I do feel confident the whole CSR thing is going to come right back. And that's what a lot of people are calling their reports. I don't know if either of you had looked at Apple's reports yet, sustainability reports. They've done a historical scrub and just call it environment now. Mm-hmm. They don't have ESG reports. They don't have sustainability reports, just environment. Yeah. All the DEI stuff that was in there, all the S stuff, all the G, gone.
Wow.
So there's a lot of trends here at play. People are taking it differently. Without that literacy or the compliance knowledge, there is a temptation to go just back to these high-level themes that don't necessarily show the value, Owen, that you're talking about.
But don't you think they can? Like, don't you think you can usually show the value of these initiatives?
Oh, I'm with you. I do. But that takes some rigor and it takes some time.
Yeah. It's hard. I agree.
Attention, maybe, is a better word I'm looking for.
Well, we're running out of time, Alex. I have a million more questions I'd love to ask you, so I'll have to get back to Chicago to see you speak again. But
yeah, please. Before
we get to the last question, I want to ask one more about the book. You know, you kind of just hinted at, like, when you sat down and say, okay, I'm writing this book. I'm motivated by the world around me, and then by the time, I mean, I'm sure it takes a while to write a book, or at least sometime. By the time the book came out, the world has changed a lot.
Yeah.
So I guess. Is there a sequel? You know, what's going to happen next? Or how do you write books about this topic in such a fast changing environment?
Yeah, you're right. I wrote this first one in 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Because I felt like we had to, me just writing like 1,000-word blog post, fine. But, like, for you to really engage with people in a new or different way and think really comprehensively, a book can sort of command that attention, for these target audiences. I've thought a lot about it, and I am thinking a lot about what happens next. And I told people who were helping me, my editor, I'm like, I wrote it in 6 weeks, but still, like what I had on USAID and certain things, I had so many parts in highlight in yellow. I will have to revisit this the day it goes out, in terms of publishing. So part 2, yes, and I do think there is a lot to say about national security.
Yeah.
We know that is the operating constraint. The financial piece, the monetization, we know that's the operating constraint. And it's our job as entrepreneurs, business people, American citizens to think of how do we get it done under these constraints and then change the constraints we don't like.
Well, very cool. I'll look forward to being added to the editor list when you come out with the sequel.
Yeah, I want all the feedback. I can stress test the outline with you, but yes, I do look forward to engaging with you.
One of the chapters from my friend Joel, has the corporate sustainability movement failed?
Yeah, I'll quote you in the preface. It's good. No, it really is good. It's prompted a lot of useful discussion, Joel. I'm not just saying that.
Joel, are you still thinking about writing a book?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, let's hear it. What's yours?
Well, let's workshop it here because I think I'm a little too crude or crass in the way I want to describe it. Like, I think I have a whole outline. I'm looking at it actually right now, and it's like one of the chapter 1 is this corporate sustainability movement needs a grenade dropped on it. And I have other chapters called, like, if you're working in corporate sustainability, you have to be prepared to be fired. And so, some of the thesis around is just like kind of the title of our podcast here. And it's a theme I'm really like, after 20 years in the environmental movement, I find myself strongly behind, which is, like, we've had too much in my whole career. Well, the rich guys need to do something about it, the rich people, or the regulators, or the federal government, or the states, or it's always someone else, like in our field, like that's not doing enough. And Owen and I kind of have we share this perspective of stop complaining, stop asking someone else to fix it, and get your ass out there and create a solution to fix it. So I don't know, maybe there's a book in there somewhere.
I look forward to more. I'll read it.
Well, Alex, on that note, again, here we've talked about a little bit today. There's a lot of negativity, pessimism in our field, and sometimes we get caught up in the downside of the news around sustainability, but there's a lot to be hopeful for and be optimistic about. So what gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, actually, when you think about markets that matter, and this is jargon that we talked about not liking, but locked-in emissions, China and India. Actually, I was just recently in India talking to people in Modi's administration as part of my work with the council. And they're serious about renewables. In certain ways for energy access, they need to balance that question. But I am excited about how real that commitment is. And then in China, they're requiring disclosure on emissions. So For me, thinking about geopolitics, global supply chains, you can't just offshore your emissions as easily as you used to be able to. So I know it's more jargon, but hey, I think it will have a net effect in a positive direction.
No, there's a lot of unique perspectives you give us, Alex, and you can tell why you're a consultant in demand. I mean, that was an answer. I don't know how many episodes we've done, Owen, this year, 20 or so. I mean, no one's pointed to China and India from the optimistic side yet, which is cool.
It's a first.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Alex, let's wrap up on that. Thank you so much for joining, taking the time here. We talked about the book, but plug away. Where can people find the book? Where are you going to be speaking next? How does people follow your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So if people want to hang out with me in Chicago, I love to force feed people. So we have really good food at my office, and I will feed anyone who comes. And I'll feed anyone who finishes my book, front to back, actually. I promise that. That was not a joke. My book is on Amazon. There's a recorded version for people who prefer listening as well on Audible. You can find more about my company, Telesto Strategy, at our website, more about me on my own website. In terms of speaking opportunities, there's a lot happening in higher ed for me over the next couple quarters, but also sort of convening corporate sustainability leaders in Chicago, New York, and London over the months ahead. So keep me posted.
Very cool. We will, for sure. Yeah. The audiobook, are you the reader? Are you the narrator?
Again, I joked with you both before we started. My mom has told me I talk like I have shit in my mouth. Can I swear on this? Actually, I don't know.
Of course. We encourage
in my mouth. Yeah. So it's like, that's in the back of my head. So I hired a professional, the guy who did Ron DeSantis' book, actually, to be more nonpartisan, right? Why not? So I read the preface. So.
Very cool. Well, we'll have to check it out. Yeah. Owen's. I think we had another author on, and then we have a couple more coming. And Owen has been alluding to that we need the Less Talk, More Action book club. So, the courage to continue will be on top of the list for sure.
Your book will be. You'll be first, and Joel's will be second.
Love it. And Owen, then it's yours.
I know. Then I'm up. I'll just have ChatGPT write mine.
He done tomorrow.
Well, thank you again, Alex. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, everyone, for joining. You can also find Owen and I on LinkedIn, usually actively antagonizing the more talk, more complaining sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at lesstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action to make the world a better place?